All right, we're going to answer every AFC draft question that exists in the world, all of them, every single one. We're going to answer them all. Plus, we're going to snake draft, not the best, but the worst of the NFL. Fitz from Fitz. Look it up. The kids call outfits Fitz. I'm telling you, we got all that and more. I'm Jason Fitz. It's time for Zero Blitz. Welcome to Zero Blitz. Frank Schwab is back. I'm Jason Fitz. We're hanging out. And Frank, I missed you, buddy. Zero Blitz with Frank and Fitz sounds way better. I appreciate Nate Tice stepping in last week, and I'm gonna be honest with you for a minute. He's prettier than we are, but you know what? I missed our dynamic duo combo. I feel like the tag team's back, and now tag team back again. We can do some whoop, there it is sort of dance or something.
I feel like you're just wasting time here because we want to get down to the real news here. Where are you at in the NCAA tournament experts pool, Fitz? Because I just got the tied for third, which is me. I didn't see you anywhere around there. I didn't see you anywhere close to myself in the NCAA tournament experts pool. Where are you these days?
I have no idea. I haven't looked. Okay, I haven't looked, Frank. Okay. You know what?
Right.
The tournament has not been kind to me or to my wallet. I play in one. Not that you asked, but I'll share this with you. I play in one tournament challenge every year that my buddy runs, Sean. And he runs this. It's a capture tournament, right? So at the beginning of the entire tournament, names are drawn randomly, and you have a team. And so, my team, one of my teams I played multiple entries into it, but one of my entries was NC State, which
get out of here. Come on.
But here's where it gets interesting. You don't have to win. All you have to do is cover. And if you cover, you capture the team and you move forward. So all I've ever needed NC State to do is not lose by more than the point spread. It's an interesting way to do this and win some money, but I'm telling you, you get extra if your team wins outright. So NC State is making up for all. I don't care about any of the other pools because right now I'm getting close to the bottle service for free range on this pool that has happened right now. And got to realize, look, I don't need NC State to win it all. I need them to keep being an underdog and just lose by enough that they cover, and I technically win. I could win this whole damn thing. So look, cash
when you get
pride.
NC State, right? When you get NC State, you're like, ugh, oh, great. I'm one and done here. I mean, they were the 10th seed in the ACC tournament 3 weeks ago, for goodness sake. But good on you. Good on you. That makes up for your epic failure in the NCAA tournament experts bracket pool. But
who did you have winning it all in the experts?
I do have Purdue. So.
You have Purdue winning it all. Then I'm going to be fine.
I just couldn't go chalk. I couldn't go chalky. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm getting my licks in now because I couldn't go chalky. When I play on NCAA tournament pools, you can't. 35% of people in Yahoo Bracket Madness were picking UConn. I can't do that. It goes against what I stand for. So I did go contrarian and pick Purdue. But we're still alive there. I'm still alive. Zach Edey took me to the Final Four. So my bracket's still not terrible.
You're acting like there's not some level of Midwest homerism in this process too, all right? Because let's be real. If Purdue was in, I don't know, New Mexico, would you have picked Purdue? I'm just saying, maybe a little bit of Midwest favoritism.
Yeah. Have you ever, by the way, been to West Lafayette, Indiana?
Yeah,
I have. Yeah. Ooh, wow. Yeah. Let's just say of the Big Ten cities, it does not rank very high. I'm sorry about my Purdue fans, but hey, I picked you to win the tournament, so don't get too mad at me.
Yeah. Well, look, you don't have to worry about it. What are you going to do? Offend all three lifelong diehard Purdue fans? They're all, my goodness. They're all headed to Phoenix, which, by the way, I'll be there. So if you don't like what I have to say about Purdue, you can come find me, Danny Green, and Kristen Peak as we will be in Phoenix covering. I've never done it. I've never, for all the years working at ESPN and got to cover a lot of different things. Because CBS has all the rights to the Final Four, ESPN never really sends anybody. So this is my first time covering the Final Four. And I feel like I'm working with Danny Green. That means I'm going to get all sorts of +1s to the club. I feel like I'm going to have a wild weekend in Phoenix. I mean, Danny hasn't really agreed to any of this, but it's just, I think it's presumed you work with him. You become his +1, right? That's the easy thing.
Final Four is a great event. I covered one when Syracuse won way back, Carmelo Anthony. It dates me a little bit. And then went to the Final Four when Wisconsin lost on a lucky 3 by one of the Harrison twins from Kentucky. And I left wondering why I even root for sports teams. But yes, the Final Four is a great event. You will have a blast in Phoenix.
The one thing we can all agree on is today's a happy day because it's Happy Duke Loss Day. The Duke season is over. The entire country, other than our boss, can be very... So Spoon, if Spoon's listening to this, our boss who went to Duke and is a massive Duke fan, I can't stress this enough. Man, I'm so bummed Duke lost. If Spoon's not listening to this, Happy Duke Loss Day. That's the very important thing. All right. So here's what we're going to do over the course of this episode. We are going to identify the need for every AFC team in the entire AFC. We're going to figure out what they need in the draft more than anything. Some of these are going to be easy. Some of these will be a little tricky. We'll go through all of them. Plus, we're going to snake draft as we always do, but snake draft with a little controversy. I decided I would be a beacon of darkness instead of my usual beacon of light. So I pitched this morning that we should snake draft the worst. So we're going to look at the worst NFL uniforms of all time. But before we get to that, let's get to some big news from over the weekend, not the least of which is a curious instance with Rashee Rice, the Chiefs wide receiver, was part of a 6-vehicle crash in Dallas. There was a Lamborghini and a Corvette. Looks like there's some dash cam footage that's out there all over Twitter X that they were racing. A crash happened, impacted multiple vehicles. What's important here is that Rashee Rice fled the scene. And so it's reported that it was Rashee Rice. I want to be very careful and make sure that everything we're saying is here's what's being reported so far, because the cops haven't actually talked to Rashee. Like, he seems like he's just floating in the wind somewhere. So it's taken a minute to try and track him down, which I'm sure if he was involved is part of the strategy of all of this. It's just for the Chiefs. Man, this was a young player that you're banking on. This is a bad look in the offseason for somebody that is an important part of what you're trying to build towards.
Right. I mean, first of all, I'm just glad that nothing worse happened out of this. I mean, look, we don't know Rashee Rice's involvement. We're all getting facts here. The police will get involved. But if Rashee is involved in any way, you do think back, Henry Ruggs only happened a couple of years ago. You would think a guy in his position, a young ascending receiver, same position, would not get involved in this nonsense. What are you doing? What do you whoever was driving these cars, you're putting other people in danger. You're putting yourself in danger. It's a bad look. We'll see what happens. We'll see if the NFL gets involved. We'll see what the Chiefs have to say about all of it. But if Rashee is involved in any way, look, you're a young guy. He finished last season so well. His career is on the upswing. I remember talking to him a little bit at Super Bowl last year. Really engaging guy. Future, very, very bright future ahead of him. It's just kind of a message to other NFL players, whoever was involved in this, make better decisions. You don't need to do this. This is... You're a professional now. You shouldn't be driving your Lambo 100 and whatever miles an hour down the street racing somebody else. Make better decisions. This is not just your life, other people's lives involved, and your profession too. We'll see where it all goes, but we all saw the video. It's scary. It could have turned out a lot worse. I'm glad it didn't. But we'll see how the NFL and the legal community down there get involved, and the police and all that. So. It's just a bad look all around. Not the kind of headline you want to wake up to on a Sunday in late March.
Well, and part of that, also, I'm going to go back to what we've seen in Georgia, because you mentioned Henry Ruggs, but Georgia's had so many issues. And then what did we have last week? Georgia running back Trevor Etienne faced disciplinary action from the University and Athletic Department following a DUI arrest over the weekend where he was speeding. And you just look at some of this and I just want to remind everybody a very core, easy thing to know is that every NFL team gives every single player an allocation of money that they can use to call Uber and write it off. It's free. I think it's $2,500. Last time I checked, it was $2,500 for most teams that they give for the year to use for cabs or Ubers for free. There's absolutely no consequence to that. If you go over the $2,500, then you can submit it to the team and still be reimbursed. And on top of all of that, you also have somebody on call 24/7 with the team that will pick you up anytime, anywhere you ever need to go anywhere. So obviously that's something I talk a lot about whenever there's a DUI instance, but also when you're talking about guys driving like idiots down the freeway, there's just an element of me that's like, understand the leveraged risk you have, not just in hurting people. Obviously, as you said, that's the most important part of this, hurting yourself, changing multiple people's lives. Those are all incredibly stupid things to do. But on top of that, knowing that the systems are in place, Frank, if I knew that I could simply call Yahoo and submit a bill and be driven to and from anywhere I ever want to go, there's just an element of like, man, I'm going to lean that way 99% of the time. And even if there's nothing done wrong, if they find out that this is Rashee Rice was involved in this and he left the scene, that's a terrible look. Like you have to know better through all of this. So, again, so many details still to come, but just in general, every time I see a motor vehicle incident involving an NFL player, the first thing I think of is, man, most of society would be lucky to have the systems in place that they have to prevent these sorts of things, yet they don't use them. And I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, it's a selfish thing for the NFL, too. The Kansas City Chiefs don't want Rashee Rice getting in any legal trouble here, right? Like, they don't want him suspended for 2 games to start the season. Or I don't even know what the NFL would do in a case like this, but they have these systems in place, like you talked about, with the, hey, call this person, we'll give you a ride, we'll pay for your lift, whatever, because they don't want these guys getting in trouble with the law or getting suspended. Also, they want their players to be safe and all that kind of stuff. But yes, everything is in place for these guys to it's just making smart decisions. I get it. Rashee Rice is probably 22, 23 years old. You're still trying to grow up and figure out things in life, but this should be obvious, especially like you said, the Georgia stuff, the Henry Ruggs stuff. Don't be drag racing down the freeway. Like, this should be obvious to everybody involved, but whoever was driving, don't do that. And
if you're in the car, just be like, dude, no, man, I got too much at stake. Like, just stop.
Yes,
like, that's
it's just frustrating because, we saw how, and I keep coming back to Ruggs because we saw how his life, he threw it away. I mean, this is a guy who was another ascending NFL player for a first-round pick, and he took somebody else's life, and it just doing stupid stuff, being an idiot. And you hope that hopefully there's a lesson for other guys. So whether Rashee Rice was involved or not, just be smarter. You don't need to do this. Come on.
It's interesting to me. Before we move on, I'll just say this. There's a whole generation of musicians that blew all their money and their lives are terrible that were famous in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I always credit the TV show Behind the Music, in all seriousness. Like, because if you were growing up a kid that wanted to make it in the music business, you saw Behind the Music over and over and over again. And you see where they're like, now he has a day job. And you're like, my God, how is it possible that this 80s rock musician is working at a Big Lots, right? Like, that's not what I thought. And I genuinely think it changed the way that people perceived money and fame and the work ethic of musicians. What I can't understand is why the same impact isn't happening for some athletes that are looking around, because they do these symposiums and they have athletes step up and talk to them about all the mistakes. And like, at some point, it's just got to sink in. I'm the first to admit, when in my early 20s, if you'd handed me millions of dollars in fame at that point in my life, I wouldn't have handled it the right way either. But man, there's just so many systems. And that's how, if systems are in place to prevent exactly what's happening right now. Most importantly, we hope everybody that was involved in the accident is healthy and fine, and that this is just about a stupid decision. And we hope that through all of it, Rashee, in an ideal, perfect world, we find out Rashee was just a passenger and not even involved. We'll keep you updated as we get more. Other news, Jadeveon Clowney to Carolina, 2 years, $20 million. You've been looking at all the free agents. I don't know what to think of Jadeveon Clowney anymore. Like, am I supposed to be excited about Jadeveon? Like, sure, sometimes he puts up some big numbers. Sometimes it feels invisible. I don't know, $20 million for 2 years, not a big risk for Carolina, so it's cute.
A good, solid defender. Clowney is, somebody talked, I was doing radio the other day and somebody called Clowney a bust. And I'm like, I get where you're coming from, but Jadeveon Clowney's probably over $100 million for his career, right? I haven't looked up his career earnings, but he's carved out a nice he's been in the league 11, 12 years by now, made a lot of money, been a good, solid defender for a long time. Maybe he wasn't the Superman we thought he was going to be when he was in Michigan's backfield, knocking the guy's helmet off, but he's had a good career, solid signing by Carolina, just who needs talent, right? Like they got a lot of money to spend, and why not? It's 2 years, $20 million, not a big investment for a guy who still very good against a run, can rush a passer here and there, and just yeah, you're right. You're not getting excited about Jadeveon Clowney anymore, but a good, solid signing by Carolina. I got no problem with it.
Just looked it up, $85 million in his career so far, not including this contract he just signed. So this contract will likely put him over that. And by the way, not for nothing, I mean, 52.5 career sacks. Like, overall, does that match the number of what was expected? Maybe not, but 52.5 career sacks is not nothing, especially a couple injury years. So, it's still, I think he's had a nice, look, is he a Hall of Famer? No. Has he had a nice little career? Yeah, he's found a niche. So where are you, speaking of pass rushers, where are you on Haason Reddick to the Jets for a 2026 conditional third? Look, it could become a second. You never know with these things. But the Eagles, whose pass rush last year was abysmal, now send Haason Reddick to the Jets, where Jets fans are super excited that they got Haason Reddick. And I'm sitting here saying, man, the Eagles looked at it, decided they needed an upgrade. They decided he wasn't worth it, even if it just means a third-round pick next year, which is that's the same as a package of Skittles for him. So I don't know, if I don't think Haason particularly moves the needle for me. I think Jets fans are blowing this up into something it isn't.
Yeah, I wonder what Haason has left, because 2 years ago he was fantastic. I mean, that team that went to the Super Bowl, he was one of the key pieces there. Not too long ago. I think it's a good, solid move by the Jets. Maybe overpaid a little bit with draft. You could probably get him a little cheaper than a third conditional second, but he's going to be a good defender for them. I don't know that he's ever going to be the guy he was 2 years ago again. Maybe that has passed, but what if he is? What if that guy returns again? He was a dominating force 2 years ago. He was really in that Defensive Player of the Year conversation. So again, not that long ago. I like the move well enough by the Jets, who have had a really, really good offseason. I mean, they've shored up a lot of things. They've added a lot of guys. I don't know if it's going to work necessarily, because it all matters about how healthy the quarterback is, but I like what the Jets have done this season. That includes getting Reddick at a little bit of a discount, I guess.
Yeah, and in fairness, I should give him credit. You're right. 16 sacks 2 years ago, but in the last several years, 12 and a half, 11, 16, 11. There's been some consistency there. I just think it's funny. If I Googled to get his stat line while we were talking, and this is what makes the NFL great. I Googled Haason Reddick. That's all I typed in, because I knew it would take me right to Pro Football Reference. The top article from Sports Illustrated, why Philadelphia Eagles Haason Reddick trade was a savvy one for GM Howie Roseman. The next article down, why Joe Douglas hit a home run with Haason Reddick. So
gotta love the NFL, man.
I just I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here, but they both didn't hit home runs. That just doesn't happen. Sure, we can take one quarterback trade that we can all remember between the Rams and Lions and say maybe that was a home run, but come on, somebody here probably won and somebody here probably lost. So I just want to remind everybody of that at least.
Yeah, there's no shortage of praise for Howie Roseman. Let's put it that way. Howie Roseman can, iron his shirt in the morning, and 18 NFL analysts will say that's the greatest ironing job in NFL history. So Howie doesn't lack for praise around here. Let's put it that way.
We all had that friend as a kid that would come home with the art they made in school, and you knew it was trash. Everybody knew it was trash. And their mom and dad is like, oh my God. And it's still on the fridge 3 months later. Now, I'll admit, as I work through therapy here, my mom was quite the opposite. She'd look at it and be like, and throw it away. She's like, you could do better. Throw it away, right? So maybe there's a happy medium, but you're right. I feel like sometimes Howie Roseman comes in and he's like, look at my eggshell pasta artwork. And we're all sitting there like, yay, it's
A plus. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of art, we're about to do some art. This is going to be amazing. You don't want to miss a single second of it, because now we are going to figure out exactly what every team in the AFC needs to draft. Or if maybe they should just give it all up, put their feet up, and have a drink, because it feels like some teams are helpless. But we'll figure it out. We'll go through every team in the AFC coming up next. Hey, Frank, you got any draft fatigue yet? Is it setting in? You do so much writing, and you're looking at the gambling odds. And now, last week, it was J.J. McCarthy's gambling odds are skyrocketing up. And we see this, there is a point for me, and as we've debated, every year, the draft is my favorite event of the whole year. I am super excited. Pretty soon we'll be able, I think, to tell you about some things Yahoo's doing for the draft that I'm giddy. I'm giddy like a child. I love the draft. And even I am sitting here saying okay, let's break down the draft. You know what I mean? When does draft fatigue set in for you?
It will set in when the contrarian takes start coming in, when somebody out there, and it'll catch fire that Caleb Williams isn't exactly the number one overall pick. It's Bo Nix. And we'll just waste time on that for a while. And then Caleb Williams will be drafted first overall anyway, because it's coming. It happens all the time. I remember Andrew Luck really isn't the first overall pick. It should be Robert Griffin III. And we do this cycle where We just get tired of just saying, yeah, okay, Caleb's going to be the first pick, and he deserves to be the first pick, and we need some contrarian takes, and they're coming, and I'll tell you, I will text you when I see them. I'll be like, here it is. Yeah, that's it. I'm draft fatigue now. Let's get to the draft that we're talking about. Actually, Michael Penix should be the first pick, or whatever crazy wild take we're going to hear in the next couple of weeks.
I do think it's funny, because we were talking on Inside Coverage last week about, the rise in stock of J.J. McCarthy. And C-Rob was making a really good point about how this happens every year.
C-Rob wrote this perfectly. He did. He wrote a great story on this.
But here's the thing that I keep going back to with his examples. Mac Jones, all of a sudden, was going to be drafted higher than anyone thought. Trey Lance was this big controversial draft moment. Malik Willis was this, if we go back through all of the quarterbacks that have had like this really weird rise, they've all sucked. I just want to point that, not a single weird riser. Yes, there were moments where people with Joe Burrow were like, I don't know, it's been one season, but I think anybody that pulled their head out of their ass long enough to breathe that watched any Joe Burrow footage would tell you that you had a pretty good idea that he at least had a good shot to be great, right? But for the most part, these quarterbacks that we're trying to cram into everybody's mind, maybe Josh Allen is the exception to the rule here, because I think people were a little bit left and right, but there wasn't this meteoric rise. The whole time Josh Allen was part of the conversation. The whole time Patrick Mahomes was part of the conversation. It was just where do they fit in? The guys that seem to be in the middle of the pack that all of a sudden we're getting crammed down our throats as higher picks, they always suck. So I'm starting to feel like Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy are going to suck, because history says the guys that all of a sudden we feel like they're going to get clipped off and I'm going to get murdered for it. But the guys that all of a sudden rise on boards, history is not kind to. That's all I'm saying.
You're not. I mean, I can't come up with a great example to refute that. So J.J. McCarthy, sorry, buddy. Your NFL career is already over. Fitz has called it. It's done. We might as well not even show up. It's okay.
And I swear to God, Stone, if you clip this off and play it back for me right after the Raiders draft J.J. McCarthy, I will fly to your house. I will fly to your house and I will poop on your front door. I just want you to know, just right there. That's the way it's going to. I don't know why it went there. I'm sorry, Stone. I feel bad about that.
That's a little extreme.
Follow Stone on Twitter at SJ Rochelle and tell him that I suck, because I deserve that. All right, let's look at all of the draft needs in the AFC, Frank. And we'll just go division by division. I'm going to be honest with you here. It's written in the doc in a certain order, so I'm not going to get clever. We're just going to go in the order that it's written in the doc, because I think the first team on the page is actually a really interesting team, and it's the New England Patriots. Remember, the Patriots picked third. And here's what's challenging to me. When we ask draft needs for the Patriots, I think you could take one of those old scrolls and just flop it out and just start reading.
Right, exactly.
They got 100 needs, but you're in the same division as Josh Allen. And I believe that as long as the Bills have Josh Allen, they're going to be wildly competitive. You're in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes, which means if you really want to get back to the Patriots Super Bowl world, you got to be able to compete with Patrick Mahomes. I don't know. I could totally see the Patriots taking a smart strategy of, I'm going to trade down and pick up a bunch of players. Okay, but who's your quarterback? They don't have a quarterback at all. So I feel like at number 3, we're overcomplicating this. You can't win a Super Bowl in the modern AFC, I don't think, without a great quarterback. You don't have to get him at 1 or 2, but you got to get the guy. They don't have anybody. So I feel like quarterback has to be their number one most important thing they have to come away from the draft with. They have to resist the temptation to get more of nothing when they need a quarterback so badly.
Yeah, I mean, when I was studying for this and putting down team needs, it literally was everything. It was, they could use a receiver, obviously need a quarterback, offensive line could use some, bolstering. Their defense needs some talent too. It's just the most talent poor roster in the NFL. And to your point of, do you trade back? Do you trade back from 3? I say no. You draft the quarterback. Unless you just don't look, that's part of the equation too, is if you're sitting there and you're the New England Patriots, you've done all your homework, and you really don't like Drake May, you really don't like J.J. McCarthy or whoever's going to be there for you, then maybe trade. Don't marry a quarterback just because you feel the need to. If you don't love him, you better be ready, because if you draft a quarterback 3rd, that's your guy for the next few years. Jared Mayo's going to sink or swim with that guy. But I assume that they'll like one of these quarterbacks well enough to take him 3rd. I don't trade back. You take care of your biggest need. That's quarterback. you build around the quarterback, not the other way. So, I think that this team needs everything, though. There's not a spot on this team where you're like, yeah, they're set, no problem. This is a really, really talent-poor team.
So I'm going to give you the worst analogy in history, but I used to tour with a drummer years ago that's a great dude, and particularly a great man of faith, and married with like 87 kids. Like, he's one of those guys that's going to have like 432 kids by the time he's done. But whenever he was on the bus, there was one other guy on the bus that, had sort of a wandering eye, right? And every time he would come up on the bus, he'd be like, man, that girl over there, she is pretty. He always said the same thing. He said, just remember, there's a difference between hot and half everything you own hot. Because once you're married, half everything you own hot is different. And he said, just wait until you have kids, because there's a big difference between half everything you own hot and half everything you own in every other weekend hot. Like, that's a total different level, right? To your point with the quarterback, I do think that you have to be like absolutely convinced that you have got the person, because if you at 3 take the quarterback and you're wrong, everybody's getting fired. Now you're half everything you own and every other weekend. Like, you just lost everything in that process. So you better be damn well convinced that that quarterback is absolutely life. So you are right. If their analysis doesn't tell them to take a quarterback, then the smartest thing to do in my mind is to trade back and try and get more equity. But what'll be interesting is to see what quarterbacks are left on the board at that spot. So let's go to now that I've given everybody the weirdest, cheating on your wife analogy, let's go to the Miami Dolphins next. And I want to say one important thing about the Dolphins, Frank, and this is key. The Dolphins are about to have to pay a lot of people, which is why they've gone through some of the issues they've gone through. I don't think there are many teams in the NFL that need to have better drafts for the next couple of years than the Miami Dolphins. The one thing they need to do is hit singles to get players that can actually contribute right out of the gate, because the more they're going to be paying guys like Tua and keeping the guys on their roster they want to keep, the more important it is that they get a guy in the first round, the second round, the third round that can help. So they lose Christian Wilkins. I think they need defensive line help. But most importantly, the Dolphins are a team that if they went best player available, I don't fault it, because they need to keep restocking the cupboard with cheap labor.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And you look, to me, it's the interior of the defensive line and the offensive line. When you look at free agency, I believe only 3 guys got $100 million deals in free agency this offseason. I might be missing somebody. Obviously, one was Kirk Cousins. The other 2 are former Dolphins. Christian Wilkins goes to the Raiders in a defensive tackle spot. Robert Hunt, their guard, goes to the Carolina Panthers for $100 million. You got to replace those guys somehow. And like you said, they're to the point of it's getting thin because of salary cap. They've paid a lot of guys. I mean, they rallied a little bit with like the Kendall Fuller signing and all that. One spot for them that they really need to look at, those pass rusher, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, both injured late last season. It's a spot you need to fill. All of a sudden, this Miami team seems a lot thinner than you would like for a team that was so good last year. We'll see how the problem with this, though, Fitz, like you said, you got to hit on guys that they could contribute right away, but they're going to be drafted pretty late in the draft if they're as good as we think they're going to be, right? Like this year they're drafting late. Next year they're hopefully going to be drafting late. And you get to this point where you're trying to hit home runs at the 23rd pick or whatever, and that's not easy to do always.
Yeah, no, you're 1,000% right. That's why the Chiefs have been putting on a clinic for a long time, right? And We'll get to them later. The Bills, next up on the list, it feels like it's got to be the defensive side of the ball, right? Like they need help, particularly when it comes to pass rush. They need some secondary help. But is there a little piece? It's a wide receiver deep draft. Every year we keep hearing about the problems. Like, is there a little part of you where you're like, let's just hedge our bet a little bit and make a strength stronger?
To me, it's totally receiver. And not just because they lost Gabe Davis, who's up and down. I get Gabe Davis issues. They signed Curtis Samuel, who, whatever. I'm not the biggest Curtis Samuel guy. He's fine. He'll be productive in that offense. But it's a lot about Stephon Diggs. I'm really concerned at the second half of last season for Stephon Diggs. Like, he did not look anything like a number 1 receiver anymore. And that's troubling with a healthy Josh Allen, right? Like, maybe Diggs is dealing with some injuries, but he is getting older at this point. At some point, you have to build around Josh Allen. And going back, me and C-Rob were talking about this when we used to do this show. We talked about this last season. We did a show. You can't ask Josh Allen to do every single thing in your offense. You need help for him. And if the Bills can find one of those receivers, a true alpha number 1 going forward, not that he's going to be that guy. You're not finding Justin Jefferson probably. That's rare for a rookie, but a guy who can develop into that. I think you take that plunge. I think receivers are their biggest need. I really do. I think making sure Josh Allen has the weapons around him for the long term. Yeah, defenses, they have to replenish the defense too. They're another one of these teams that's paying a lot of guys, so the cap is an issue. But to me, it's receiver. You really need to get receivers to go around Josh Allen. Even have a Packers type of draft where you draft multiple receivers. And you hope a couple of them hit, and it certainly did for the Packers, to where we're looking at the 2024 Packers, say, look at this young receiver room. Oh, my goodness. I wish the Bills would do that for Josh Allen.
Yeah, especially where they're picking, by the way. Picking at 28, there's still going to be a good wide receiver left on the board. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Jets, simple to me. Fattest guy on the board. Like whoever you feel like is going to cost you the most money to feed every day, that's the person you like. The person that you don't want to be behind in the cafeteria line every day, that's the person. Like just take, and I don't care how many fat guys they've added this offseason. I don't care that they've added good fat guys. Like I want more offensive line help. I want long-term answers at the offensive line. I want anything that I can put, like I want the ability to plug and play a bunch of guys so that if my 40-year-old quarterback can come back from an Achilles tear, which I'm not all in on, if that happens, at least I give myself the best chance possible to keep him upright. So go get him.
Right. And Tyron Smith is going to miss games. As good as he is, it's just part of his resume now that he's going to miss some games. Like he's the great former Cowboy. I think 2016 was the last time he played every game in a season. So you're going to need backups. You're going to need depth. But let me ask you this. At what point do you draft a quarterback of the future? Zach Wilson obviously did not work out. You have a 40-year-old coming off an Achilles injury, as you talked about. I believe they signed Tyrod Taylor this offseason to be the backup. Where's your quarterback of the future? You have to address this at some point, don't you? There's a pretty quarterback deep draft. A lot of these guys are going to go in the top 11. You're probably not going to get one of those guys. But at what point do you say, we need to draft Aaron Rodgers' replacement? He ain't going to be around here that long. We don't even know if he's going to be good this year coming off that Achilles.
Yeah, but I think as you and I both know, there are certain times, because we've made clear, we like to dabble, right? There's certain times that you're sitting at the tables in a nice casino and you realize that things aren't going your way, but you're too pot committed and you just keep throwing bad and you keep throwing bad and there was one night in Vegas during the Super Bowl where all I did, every time I put money out on the craps table, it was like I might as well have just handed it to the dealer and said, "Thank you, ma'am. Please take my cash." Like that's all I had.
I think I was standing next to you that night.
It was painful for me. I feel like that's where the Jets are. Like the biggest mistake the Jets made in this entire process is that they went all in on a quarterback that I just.
Now you're committed.
They're committed now. And so here's the thing. It's not a mistake if they won a Super Bowl last year. It's not a mistake if they win a Super Bowl this year. Because if you win a Super Bowl for the next 5 years when you suck, you can look at your fans and say, yeah, but we brought you the Lombardi Trophy. The problem is I don't think that they're a Super Bowl caliber team. And I think we're just taking for granted that this concept that he's going to come back, he being Aaron Rodgers, is going to come back and be perfectly healthy. I don't think that's realistic. So I don't have any belief in the Jets. So what they're going to end up with is realizing that they threw a bunch of money at a team that almost like a bad remodel. They ran out of money after the kitchen, and now the rest of the house is just in shambles, and they're going to have to gut it all the way down to the studs and rebuild it from scratch. And when I said last year I didn't like a lot of the moves for Jets fans, they absolutely murdered me on social media for weeks, right? They're going to do the same thing when we clip this out. They're going to tell me that I'm a piece of that doesn't know anything about football. But here's the real of it. Your team right now is not better than the Buffalo Bills. Your team right now is not better than the Kansas City Chiefs. Your team right now is not better than most of the elite. I wouldn't take the Jets as a playoff team today. If they make the playoffs, fine. But let me ask you this. Was all of this worth it for the playoffs? Was it worth it for one and done in the playoffs? Because your team's going to suck for a long time after you have to rip this thing apart and you never address the future. That's the problem the Jets are in.
Yeah, I'll say that's results versus process. Look, they went all in on a four-time MVP quarterback who blew his Achilles out 4 places. Like, you can't predict that. Like, it's tough for me to sit there and say, but to your point, like, there was risk involved in a 39-year-old quarterback last year.
You can't predict that, but let's be clear. The Packers got the better of it. I mean, and maybe nobody could have predicted any of this, but realistically, right now, the Jets are trying to figure out what to do with the quarterback coming off an injury that is, telling everybody not to be a distraction, while there are some that would say the moves are distracting, with a team that is not good enough right now on paper to win their conference. On the other side of it, The Packers are sitting around saying, hey, we got rid of that quarterback. Our young quarterback has developed in a way that has been absolutely incredible. Our weapons have been great that we drafted. And now all of a sudden we look like we are poised to be a division champion type team. We are poised to be a conference contending type team. So you're right. You can't predict any of this, but you also got to sit where you are today on the business plan and say, hey, things are not good. I think the Jets are stuck between a rock and a hard place because they already invested, which means they can't do what could be smart and look to the future.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up Jordan Love, and that's kind of the blueprint, right? You draft a quarterback when you don't need one. You can develop him a little bit. He becomes your next quarterback. But I agree with you that the Jets are probably just all in on this thing and say we gotta push all of our chips in. We can't use our late first on a developmental quarterback. We can't, or even a second or whatever it is. I mean, I think you're just in on this thing now. I don't even, it's not even late first, it's mid first, but you're stuck. You're stuck in this spot where you need to do everything you can to try to win with Aaron Rodgers and hope it works out.
Now, let me remind everybody that the most important thing in our business is ratings, and the Jets get a ton of it. So if I'm wrong, I'm really happy. If the Jets want to go out and be a great team and everybody wants to click on everything we say about the Jets, fine. It's great. All right, let's move to the AFC North where we have the Ravens. And the Ravens, to me, are right now, they've suffered a lot of losses. I understand that. I don't want to minimize the losses they've suffered. I still think that we take playoff failure and assign it to regular season failure, and those are two very different conversations. The Ravens last year were one of the best teams of the regular season. I don't see any reason to think that they won't still be a very good team this year. So I like where Baltimore is, but Baltimore is in a, I think, unique situation where they have some needs for a team that's come across. Like they could go D-line, they could go O-line, they could go wide receiver. I think they have needs that they need to address for a team that I am very high on.
Yeah, I agree. Tough off season for them, really. You lose Clowney, you lose Geno Stone, you lose Patrick Queen. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to replace. And for them, I'd love to see them get an elite pass rusher, a war daddy, as Jerry Jones called it. I love that term. I use it. War daddy, I think is amazing. They don't have that. They had this great sack total last year without a unbelievable pass rusher off the edge, which is really, really rare. A lot of that was Mike McDonald, their defensive coordinator, is really, really smart guy. Well, he's off at Seattle now. Can they get a pass rusher? It's going to be hard. Also, receiver. Maybe it's a fun factor for me to just see weapons around Lamar Jackson, but we know Odell Beckham really didn't work. Rashad Bateman it hasn't really developed as they liked. It would be nice to have somebody alongside Zay Flowers to develop along with Lamar in that passing game. But I think edge rusher, if you could give me one thing to replace it, give them somebody who can get 10 sacks and just beat somebody off the edge, because they really haven't had that the last couple of years, but still have done a pretty good job rushing the quarterback. It'd be fun to see them with one of those guys who could just dominate a game like a TJ Watt, that type of player.
I love the concept of War Daddy until you remind me that it's a Jerry Jones phrase, and now all I can think of is Jerry Jones saying anything that involves daddy, and I'm out. All right. Now that I've made everybody uncomfortable. The Bengals up next on our list, and this one, Frank, this is the easiest thing in the world. Replace T. Higgins. It's a deep wide receiver draft. You know you're going to lose T after this year, right? So go get yourself your next T. Higgins. In my mind, keep putting weapons around Joe Burrow. Make his life easier and easier. Maybe I'm just playing video game football, but I want the next T. Higgins there.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. But it's one of those, what do you do for this year versus the future, the next 5 years? I like them to draft something in the interior defensive line. DJ Reader moved along to the Lions. That was I wrote about my 5 favorite moves of the offseason. DJ Reader being signed by the Lions was one of my 5 favorite moves, which means it's a big loss for the Bengals, right? I know he's coming off injury. He's 30 now, but they were bad against the run with DJ Reader most of last season. They really need the interior defensive line to be better. And that's more of a win now thing, right? Like you draft a receiver, obviously that's going to pay dividends even this year if that receiver hits. But if I'm the Bengals, I'm saying, we do have T. Higgins for one more year. What do we need to do to get to a Super Bowl with this group? Because T's probably leaving after next season. And to me, it is the defensive line. It's not a sexy pick, but it's what they need. They need to be better against the run than they were last year.
I mean, why do you hate sexy, Frank? All I want is sexy out of this. Look, at some point, this is simple for me. I mean, T's leaving, so you give yourself the next T, somebody you can develop a little bit, because sometimes it takes wide receivers a year or two to learn. Plus, the other side of it is, in the meantime, you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and one of the better wide receivers in this year's class. Come on. Like, how do you stop that? Like, they're going 3 wide everywhere. They don't even need an offensive line, which, they've tried. I'll give the Bengals credit. They've tried many times through the draft and free agency to address the O-line, and they're sure good at it.
It seems like every year it's like they signed this guy, they drafted this guy, they signed this guy, and every year we're sitting here in April 1st or whatever it is saying, well, they could draft another offensive lineman because it's still a need. It's kind of crazy how they haven't really solidified that thing with all the resources they poured into it.
Yeah, we just, we disagree on this because I want beautiful things for Joe Burrow. Actually, maybe I want Joe Burrow to become so unhappy that he forces his way out of Cincinnati to Vegas. Never mind. Don't draft all defense. Never draft anything for Joe. That feels like I've now solved a perfect solution. All right, the Browns. Any thoughts on the Browns and where like this? The Browns are a tough team in my mind to evaluate because I genuinely believe the biggest problem Cleveland has right now is their quarterback, and I don't think there's anything they can do about the fact that they have a problem at quarterback. So like it's an interesting situation to be in for Cleveland that they have draft needs, but they won't be able to address any of those draft needs early in this draft. And by the time they get to address, because they don't have a first round pick, by the time they get to, it's almost like best player available is all they can. Their defense is great. They don't need anybody on the defensive side of the ball. They went out and got another wide receiver. They don't need help there. Like, they need a quarterback. What are you going to do there? No, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and sometimes these exercises can be very illuminating because I sat there, like I said, doing some research for the show. Because you don't think about this always in a team concept of what do they need ever to, And I really studied them, and I said, Browns really don't have any weaknesses. And I include quarterback. I have not given up on Deshaun Watson being a good quarterback. Look, it's hard to talk about Deshaun Watson in glowing terms as a quarterback because of all the off-field stuff. But let's just talk about him on the field. And I talked about this last week because BetMGM came out with their over-under totals, with season win totals for the season. The one that jumped out to me right away was the Browns at 8.5. Why would the Browns be 8.5? People are that low on Deshaun Watson, who 3-4 years ago was one of the elite quarterbacks in football. Let's not forget, Houston, Texas, Deshaun Watson was one of the best quarterbacks in football. He was one of the best quarterbacks in college football at Clemson. He's had a rough couple of years. I agree. There is skepticism, and rightfully so. But is Deshaun Watson that much of a liability that you say, well, they lost Joe Flacco off an 11-win team. Of course, they're going to be an 8-win team this year with Deshaun Watson. I don't think so. And doing this exercise of trying to figure out what are the Browns' needs, I said, the Browns don't need anything. Maybe a running back because Nick Chubb is no sure thing. I hope Nick Chubb comes back and rushes for 1,500 yards, right? Very likable guy, great running back, but maybe a running back, something like that. That's a luxury pick for a team that has everything else. Yes, Deshaun Watson's a question, no doubt about that after the last couple of years, but I haven't given up on the thought of him being good still. And the Browns are absolutely loaded around him. I'll still say 8.5 at BetMGM right now for the Browns. If you dabble, I'll just say that line stands out to me a lot because this Browns team is really good.
Here's what's interesting. I wanted to be cute because they don't pick until 54th. Their first pick of the NFL draft is 54th. I wanted to be cute and live in a world where somehow, I don't think this will happen, Michael Penix Jr. falls. Like he's not selected in the second round. The Browns take Penix and treat him like Jordan Love. The problem is there's still 3 years left on Deshaun's contract, right? That they can't get out of. And in the second round, you only get 4 years on a quarterback deal. So they would be in a terrible situation. So I really think the Browns are, you're right, their weaknesses aren't easily fixed in my mind. I don't share the Watson love with you. Like, I think that, the time off and everything else is just like, sometimes guys in baseball get the yips. It feels to me like Deshaun has a bit of the yips. I don't think anything fixes that. I think he's cooked and he's going to be a liability for the Browns for the next several years. That being said, I don't think there's anything they can do about that. So if there's nothing they can do about it, they just have to go best player available at 54, whatever that might be. And I don't hate the thought of a running back there because the running backs aren't going to be run on early. This is not that type of class, but there are going to be running backs that are there for the taking. So that's an interesting, you know what? I'm going to go with the running back concept. Let's go to the Steelers next, the team well. I don't know. The Steelers are just sort of, they weren't going to be in a spot where they were going to get themselves a quarterback. We all knew that. That's part of why I think they were aggressive in doing what they did, right? So I got no problem with that. Their pick isn't until 20th. It just feels like the Steelers are going to be in a situation where they can get a good secondary option if they want. They can bring in somebody right. Like, they don't have a ton of glaring needs to me, but like, I wouldn't have a hard time with them going like corner, maybe, you know?
Yeah, go along with Joey Porter Jr., who was a great pick for them. He got him in the Chase Claypool trade, which is just magnificent work by the Steelers there. The Steelers are another one of those O-line teams. It seems like every year we talk about their O-line being a problem. They could always go O-line. I think receiver, Deontay Johnson has moved on. They traded him to Carolina. I think replacing him somehow. George Pickens has all the talent in the world, and he's still kind of unreliable. I don't know that I want to put all my eggs in George Pickens' basket, so another receiver to really receiver deep class. I can see them going that way.
I just don't trust the Steelers offensively to be able to utilize a receiver if they got one. I don't love the quarterback situation. Right, I don't love Arthur. Like, everybody keeps saying, Arthur Smith's now the offensive coordinator. Go back and watch those Titans offenses. I know that got him a job as a head coach, but it didn't give him a job as a head coach because of their greatness with wide receivers. The Titans were really bad at identifying wide receiver talent for years, and Arthur Smith was part of that. So, like, I don't trust the Steelers and Arthur Smith to get the most out of a wide receiver or to even be able to identify the right one. I have very little trust in that.
You might be right. I think their defense is fine. I mean, you can always use talent on either side of the ball, but to me, the connecting pieces on offense need some work, except maybe like they're fine at running back, they're fine at tight end, but offensive line, receiver, I could, either one of those, if I was a Steelers fan, I'd be happy with.
All right, let's go to the AFC South. This one's easy. If the Titans are sitting there at 7 and Joe Alt is available and they don't take him, that might be the stupidest thing I've seen in the draft. I don't care if you're offered the chance to trade down. If Joe Alt is sitting there at 7 and the Titans don't take him, that's stupid. If Joe Alt's sitting there at 5 and the Chargers don't take him, I think that's stupid. I think Joe Alt should be a top 5 draft pick. So if he's sitting there at 7 for the Titans, take him. If he's not at 7, take the next best offensive lineman on that offensive line was trash. Fix it.
Yep, and they started that process by signing like Cushenberry away from the Broncos. But you're right, you do need tackles. Easy. This is offensive line all day, even though they need some secondary help. They need another receiver, even though they got Calvin Ridley. This is easy. Offensive line. You go offensive line, Titans. You won't be sad about that in a couple of years.
All right. So what about the Texans, who come off a surprising year? They're they go 11-6 last year, right? Like, I feel like they're sort of in a luxury spot. They've got talent all over the place. They could take the best offensive lineman. They could take the best wide receiver. Like, I wouldn't have a hard time with any of that. I think you can continue to bolster the offense because you've identified your quarterback. So whatever helps your offense, do it.
Yeah, I'm not on the other side. I didn't think they did quite enough on defense as much as I wanted them to. They'd made a couple signings, made a couple additions that you really like. But you lose Greenard, you bring in Daniel Hunter. I mean, that's kind of a little bit of a wash. I think their interior defensive line could use some work. I think they need another cornerback to go along with Derek Stingley. They had so much cap space that I thought they were going to fill a lot more needs on defense than they did. I think DeMeco Ryans looks at this as he's a defensive guy. He's going to want help on the defense. I think the offense is in pretty good shape. I really do. I think defense for them, interior line, cornerback, I think either of those work out, and I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, and by the way, when you're the Texans, you could be sitting around saying, hey, running back, I wouldn't hate that for Houston either. So I think they've got a lot of options in front of them, and they get a lot of benefit of the doubt because they absolutely hammered the draft last year. The Jags don't get as much benefit of the doubt for me. Like, what is there a glare? I feel like I cannot believe I'm saying this. They got to get Trevor Lawrence weapons to figure out if Trevor Lawrence is the guy, and saying that feels dirty because Trevor Lawrence should be the guy. And I can't figure if like Trevor Lawrence hasn't had the production because of a myriad of others. Like, should we be making excuses for Trevor Lawrence the way we do for Justin Herbert? Maybe, like, because I can't make it make sense that it's not clear. But man, if you're Jacksonville, you just got to keep taking shots at trying to make that offense as dynamic as it could be or should be with the quarterback that you have.
Yeah, it just seems like a bunch of number 2 and 3 receivers, right? Like, there's not a standout guy. Calvin Ridley really wasn't that guy for them, and then he leaves. Christian Kirk's a very good player, but I don't know that I want him as my alpha number 1. But this is a weird team. This Jaguars team is just built weird, where they do have some players. There's no glaring weakness, but yet there are weaknesses. Interior to your offensive line. They could use another cornerback. But yeah, like just saying like, oh, you need a Justin Jefferson. Well, okay, that's great. Go ahead, find one. I mean, that's not easy. But yes, I know number one need is a true, honest-to-goodness number one receiver, but it's not always the easiest thing to find. But hey, this draft has plenty of options. But then again, what if you end up with another number two? Oh, okay, here's Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and all these number two guys. We really just still don't have a number one. Just because you have three number twos doesn't mean you have a number one.
Yeah, I think over the course of it, if they go anything they do with the offense in general, whether it's offensive line or wide receiver, I support. The Colts wrapping up the South, sort of an interesting spot because they were far better than any of us thought they would be with Anthony Richardson being hurt as much as he was, obviously, throughout the course of the year. So, I mean, if you're the Colts, I could see defensive line. Like, that makes sense. I could see corner. I could see safety.
Corner.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it feels
corner
like
to me, corner was bad for them last year, and I don't think they've really improved it much in free agency. So to me, you just take the best cornerback on the board. Another team where you could use another receiver. Every team can use receivers, right? They have Pittman. He's fantastic. They really haven't figured out that other spot between Josh Downs and Alec Pierce, and you hope one of those guys emerges. But wide receiver 2 would be fine. But to me, this is cornerback all day. You could use your first 2-3 picks on cornerback. I'd be fine with that for the Colts. I thought that was such a problem spot for them last year. I didn't make the playoffs. I think they win that division if they have better cornerback play. So that's my number one priority for them.
Yeah, and by the way, where they're picking in the middle of the first round, they should have a shot at one of the top 2 or 3 corners in this draft. So I really like their draft position for the need that they have. And saving the best division for last, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West. Like, even before we led this whole show with Rashee Rice, I think we all agreed that wide receiver was going to be a focus. Offense is going to be a focus. So, in my mind, bottom of the first round, they're still going to have a chance at a receiver that most years would be taken in the top half of the first round. They can address that. Now, it feels like, especially with L'Jarius Sneed on, corner also becomes something they're going to continue to address. But early rounds, got to feel like wide receiver. I just wouldn't be surprised, to your point that you just made, to see the Chiefs take multiple wide receivers in this draft and just try and fill the room.
Yeah, and they could do that because they're good everywhere else. Cornerback is an issue. What made their defense great last year? There were a few things. One of them was that they had these 2 elite cornerbacks, and now you don't. Like, that's something you're going to have to address. L'Jarius Sneed moving on to Tennessee in that trade. So cornerback wouldn't bother me at all. Offensive tackle wouldn't bother me at all. I mean, you never go wrong taking offensive line if that slips to you. But yes, receiver definitely stands out here, even without knowing what's going to happen with Rashee Rice or whatever with that. I love the Marquise Brown signing. 1 year, $7 million. Who cares? Like, you're taking a shot on a former first-round pick and 1,000-yard receiver with the Ravens. Like, this is a guy who has talent. He just needs probably to get in a better situation and stay healthy. Love the Marquise Brown signing, but I don't necessarily. You don't sign Marquise Brown and say, "Well, we're done. We have our receiver room covered." Like, so draft another guy, because this was. It's amazing they won a Super Bowl last year with the receiver problems they had. I mean, just patching that thing together. Don't patch it together anymore. Invest in a position and watch Patrick Mahomes cook again.
The Chargers, I know they have a quarterback. I think we're underselling the fact that the rest of this roster is being rebuilt. I know everybody loves Harbaugh and everybody loves Herbert, and that's fine. You can love both those players, but the Chargers picking at 5 have a real shot at the number 1 player in this draft that's not a quarterback. I still think quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're going to have a shot at whatever they want. The question is, do they want Marvin Harrison Jr. to team with Justin Herbert? Seems dangerous. Or do they actually want to give themselves offensive line help with, like I mentioned, Joe Alt? But I think what part of the reason I love the idea of going offensive line early is they can go wide receiver in the second round. They're still picking early in the second round to get some of those needs. But if there's a team in this year's draft that I think we're sleeping on why they should trade down, it's actually the Chargers. They have a ton of needs other than quarterbacks. So in this very rich draft where there's going to be somebody obsessed with one of these players, if I'm the Chargers, I would be very seriously considering the option of adding as many quality players. If there are 40 or 50 good players in this draft, give yourself as many shots in those first 40 or 50 picks. I think they could get a king's ransom for that 5th pick overall, and they've got a ton of needs.
Look, to me, this is just me, and maybe I'm just over the moon for this player because I'm a Big Ten guy and have seen him just dominate, but if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there for me and I'm Chargers, I run the pick up. Like, there's Aiden Hutchinson Lions pick. Remember, they ran it up. They were picking 13 seconds after they went on the clock because they wanted to show everybody this is our guy and we love this pick. That's what I'd be doing if I was the Chargers. I get it. They need offensive line help, but there's some good offensive linemen. Alt, like you said, be a fine pick for them. But no way I don't pass on Marvin Harrison if I'm for it with the Cardinals. Definitely don't pass on 5 with the Chargers. Look, they traded Keenan Allen. They had to cut Mike Williams. As much as I like Josh Palmer as a player, you need to get something for Justin Herbert to throw to. And the best receiver prospect in this draft, and maybe in many drafts, I draft Marvin Harrison all day. But yes, offensive line could use some work. But that's best player available. Like, you don't pass on a generational talented receiver like Marvin Harrison if I'm the Chargers.
The only pushback I have to that is, if you can move back 4 or 5 or 6 picks and have a shot at Rome Odunze,
I get it, but I don't think they're on the same tier. This is a hill I'm going to die on. Those guys are good. They're very, very good. Like, to me, Marvin Harrison is just, he's got Randy Moss vibes to me. And Randy Moss might be the second best receiver of all time. I'm not saying he's going to be that, but I'm not saying he's not going to be that either. Like, this guy is, to me, he is just superstar. This is going to be the number 1 receiver in the entire NFL in a few years type of guy. Like, you don't pass on. Those other guys are great. No problem with that. I get it.
Yeah,
you move back, you get extra picks, but Marvin is just something else to me. I think Marvin is the complete package.
Especially with Justin Herbert. And look, I put a lot of thought last year, as I've mentioned before, into my Biletnikoff Award vote. Humble brag, I have a Biletnikoff Award vote for best wide receiver in college football. And I keep saying the number that stuck out to me for Marvin was 0. That's the number of drops he's had over the last 2 years.
Unbelievable. He is as good as I've seen coming out of college. I just marvel at him, how good he is. I mean, he does everything well. He is just special to me. And the other guys are very, very good, but I don't pass special to draft very good.
People are going to say I'm biased when I say this, and I'm accepting that already. The Broncos suck. Top to bottom, the roster sucks.
My goodness.
The Broncos, what do the Broncos need? Everything, right?
Everything.
Like, look, and I'm sitting here saying, look, as a lifelong diehard Raiders fan, I'm sitting here saying, I see the path for the Chiefs to three-peat. It's simple. I'm sitting there saying, I think the Chargers are going to rebuild, but I believe that they have the quarterback and the coach in place to make that rebuild sustainable. And in a couple of years, they are going to be a juggernaut. I don't see any of that with Denver. Like, I think Sean Payton is doing what so many coaches do. He's ripping it down to the studs, but they weren't bad enough to get a sure answer at quarterback. And now they're in a spot where they need everything, and where they're picking, I just don't think the quarterback savior is going to be there. So if you're suddenly the Broncos, man, you need everything across the board, and you're going to have to figure out, do you trade up? How do you trade up when you need everything? So I think the Broncos are genuinely screwed in this year's draft.
Again, these exercises can be illuminating to just go through a team. I'm going to look at fresh eyes, and I was like, oh my God, the Denver Broncos could use every single position on the field, except like cornerback 1 where they have Patrick Surtain. This is a really bad team, like really, really bad. I think their season win total is 5.5, and I'm like, maybe I just punch an under ticket right now, because other than Sean Payton's X's and O's brilliance, I don't really know what this team brings to the table. Like, this is a bad football team. And so when people talk about, they're going to trade up for a quarterback, or if you're the Denver Broncos and you're this talent poor, are you really trading draft capital to move up and take the 5th best quarterback in the draft class, maybe Bo Nix or whatever you're going to do, or even McCarthy? You better be convinced, because this team needs everything. The Russell Wilson cap hit is killing them. This is a bad football team right now. Again, Sean Payton's going to get a lot out of them that he shouldn't, because he's a really, really good coach, great X's and O's. But this Broncos roster is so depleted. I could not sign off on them trading up for a quarterback, just because you need so much, and it's going to take a lot to move up and get a McCarthy, even to get a Nix maybe at 5'6", whatever you're going to get him at. I just can't justify it. This team has too many needs. Just no way. You got to start rebuilding, and it's going to be a slow, long process for the Broncos.
I won't make Stone and the entire world listen to my beloved Raiders take for the 400th time, but I will end with the team that I don't think is that dissimilar than the Jets in some ways, that the Raiders are sort of stuck. They weren't bad enough to be bad enough to get the quarterback that they need. They have too many talented players, especially you look at the money they've spent. They are telling you that they're trying to win right now, which is virtually impossible to do with the quarterback room that they have. So the only question is, can they trade up high enough to get a quarterback? And I genuinely think a team could offer 5 years of first-round picks, and the first, second, and third picks are not going to be up for sale. That means the best shot that the Raiders have is the 4th or 5th best quarterback in this year's draft. I think that's stupid. So the Raiders' biggest needs, offensive line, secondary, right? They need help on the offensive line. They need secondary help. where they're picking at 13, they'll have the chance to do all of that. I would not be surprised at all to see the Raiders in a situation where they do all of that and then they try next year to go aggressively after a quarterback in the free agent market. They try and figure out if, again, do they have the equity to move up? But you can want to move up all day, Frank, doesn't mean you can. So I think the Raiders' biggest needs that are actually attainable, offensive line and corner.
I had that exactly listed. And with the quarterback, I mean, what do you do at quarterback? You're not in a spot to draft one. So you said it best. I can't even add anything to that. That's perfectly said there.
All right, so let's snake draft because it's the most important part of this. And we're going to leave some out because, frankly, this is off the cuff. I get it. But I figure, Frank, we should snake draft in honor of April Fools. Let's snake draft the worst NFL uniforms, whatever tickles your fancy, Frank. And because you got a little bit of a break, you got a little vacation, and I missed you so much, I shall let you pick first if you would like.
You know, I am based out here in Denver, so maybe it's seeing this all the time. And I've railed on this a lot of times. People push back a little bit, but I think the current Denver Broncos uniforms are the ugliest in NFL history. I think they're terrible. I think the logo stinks. I think the font on the jersey stinks. I think the fact that they got away from orange, really, except for like color rush stuff, stinks. The Denver, like I say this all the time, with only a couple of exceptions. Everybody looked better in 1994 than they do now. Well, go back and look at some pictures of the NFL in 1994. Those are the classic jerseys you're wearing. The old D with the Bronco coming out of it, orange jersey. That's what the Broncos should have stuck with, but they switched to jersey for Nike, won a couple titles, so there's some nostalgia with that right away. But those jerseys are ugly. They are refreshing them, and they need to because they're god-awful. The Denver Broncos have, to me, the worst jerseys in the NFL, and by proxy, maybe the worst jerseys in sports. I dislike the Broncos jerseys tremendously.
So since you went current, I'm going to stay current and go with you on this. Maybe it's better if we stay current because I think we can all agree that some of the throwbacks are trash. Pittsburgh
Bumblebee.
Steelers.
Bumblebee.
Yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah. And some of the, like the Green Bay monochromatic, terrible. So we'll stay current on this because I like this. Or current. Yeah, we'll stay current. I'm going to go with this. I get my first pick off the board. And look, Jacksonville Jags jerseys are awful. Like nobody's ever walked into a store and said, "Mom, will you buy me this awesome Jags jersey?" It doesn't exist. The design was bad from the outset. The logo was bad from the beginning. And every time I think they're going to refresh it in a way that finally makes it a little less just awful, they don't, right? Like a jaguar is such a cool, awesome, amazing animal. It's like a fierce animal of just greatness. Like if you see a jaguar in the street, if you see the cat in the street, you got a problem. But if you see a jaguar somewhere, you're looking around, you're thinking, that's a badass animal. You see a Jaguar car driving down the street, you think that's a badass car. You see somebody in a Jags jersey walking down the street, you think mistakes were made and that's all you could get. Like, that's just real. So the Jags, that's my first pick. My next pick off the board, and this one, it's tough for me, but because you mentioned the 80s, 90s looks. I love the old Minuteman Patriots jersey. I do. I love it. I hate the new ones. Like, I just have not liked the Patriots jersey since the Drew Bledsoe days. Like, and every time I think they're going to bring back the throwback and make it permanent, like when they play in the red, white, and blue with the Minuteman on the side, I'm like, I get all the feels. I look at that and I say, just make that your permanent jersey. Like, everybody has to see this, right? We didn't all wake up one day blind. The Patriots jersey looks like some combination of a UFL jersey meets a Canadian Football League jersey meets I got the Wish version of it, like from a Chinese knockoff store that doesn't actually sell me the real thing. I am out. I am out on both of those jerseys. That puts you back on the clock.
That's very well done. I got to go back to the I will select Washington Commanders here because I don't think anybody likes those. Like, I get why they had to rebrand, right? When they were the Washington football team, I was actually buying it. I'm like, this is kind of cool European soccer type of deal. And then they went Commanders and everybody went, And then we saw the jerseys and everybody went, It's just so like, what is their brand? Like, it's the one branding we had that everybody immediately asked the new ownership, are you changing this right away? Because we don't like this. It stinks. And they're like, maybe we'll see. The Commanders just have there's nothing there. Who's excited? Like, do Commanders fans even own those jerseys or that gear? Probably not, because it's so dull and just nondescript and boring and ugly. There's nothing to like about the Commanders. I am back on the clock for my second pick here. And I'm going to go with, I don't hate the Los Angeles Rams jerseys necessarily, but they missed the opportunity of a lifetime. Again, my 1994 corollary. Go back and look at those jerseys. They were great. The blue and the yellow, right? Or even go back to the 70s where they just wore the blue and the white, the Deacon Jones era. Phenomenal. Look great. Instead, they just feel the need to get a little creative and be like, we're going to have cream color or whatever the heck that is. And the weird font they have with the lines coming. Just go back to what you wore in 1994. Jim Everett would be proud. I don't know why they couldn't have kept it simple. Everybody thought they were going back to that. They didn't. Just for that alone, I'll take the Rams here as one of my 5 worst jerseys.
Okay, I will end with a take that is not going to go well for me, especially after 20 plus years of life in Nashville. And I do a weekly hit with 102.5 The Game in Nashville. So I apologize in advance, Nashville. But the Titans are one of the worst jerseys in the NFL. Like, we can all agree on that, right? Like, it's an arena football league looking jersey. Everything. Like, your name is the Titans, and there's just nothing about it that screams Titan. It's these weird combinations of blue and like it's fine. It's okay, but there's nothing about it that makes anybody run to the store and say that looks bad. And when your name is Titan, like that just feels like I am of the hope with a $2 billion new stadium being built with public funding in Nashville for the Tennessee Titans. My hope is that the team finally rewards the city with what they deserve, which are brands and logos that look cool. Like Nashville's a city full of people that are either famous, have been famous, will be famous, think they should be famous. They want to hang around famous people. You want to look cool everywhere you go in this city. But no, you can't if you wear Titan stuff. Nothing about the logo like hits in a way that feels dominant. The colors are okay. It's a forgettable chapter. And I keep thinking they'll change it. Maybe the new stadium will be the impetus we finally need. And Frank, before we finish our jersey talk, I will give you my most controversial take of all time with jerseys, a take that's going to get me murdered. For years, I have just begged, like one alternate jersey for the Raiders would be such a nice thing. Like when everybody has alternate jersey time where they put out different things, I don't get that. I don't get any of that fun. It's always the throwback jerseys really don't look that much different. And I know timeless and classic and all that. Like I get timeless and classic, but if you have a closet full, as I do, of hundreds of Raiders things, at some point they all look the same. Like people are like, do you wear the same hoodie every day? No, this is different than yesterday's hoodie. They just never change anything. Like if you could just once give me like a matte black and a chrome, like same everything, just a matte black and a chrome, just a little bit of a change to the type of silver and black just once. You know how much money I would spend on it? It would be gross. Like, I'd be calling Frank and being like, hey, man, I need your credit card number. They're not letting me buy any more of this stuff. Just once. I just want one, just one alternate. They don't even have to just wear them in the preseason. Give me something I can buy.
I don't say this just because you're my good friend, but the Raiders have the best uniform in the NFL. So why screw with perfection? It's like the Yankees when why would the Yankees wear throwback or not throwbacks, but alternates? Like the Raiders have such a good uniform that whatever, just stick with it. It's great. I get it. You want something new, but don't turn into your University of Oregon or anything. Stick with what you got. It's such a great look. It's so clean. It's amazing. It's fantastic.
It's timeless. It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's all of those things, and I agree with that. I'm just saying that, you can have the most beautiful, significant other in the world. And sometimes maybe they wear a wig. Like sometimes you just want to mix things up. I just want to. Okay, I'm taking this off the rails.
You're getting us both fired. Yeah. At some point, you're getting us both fired. Yeah.
If the Duke conversation at the beginning didn't do it,
it was you to turn that off and started looking for our pink slips. Yeah.
C-Mac will be back.
Spoon, I did not say anything bad about Duke. That was all Fitz.
Duke sucks. We all know Duke sucks. C-Mac will be back tomorrow with the exempt list to hit the NFC team needs. We'll see if he does as good a job as we just did. I'm back Thursday, inside coverage with C-Rob and Jory. You know that. Follow us on Twitter at Yahoo Schwab, at Jason Fitz, and of course at SJ Rochelle, because he's the one that's going to have to edit all this into something that's actually listenable. Leave us a 5-star review. Tell us what you think of the show. Obviously, rate, subscribe, review. Tell everybody, unless you didn't like the show. If you didn't like the show, then you're not listening to this show at all. It's all a mind game. Only leave us the 5-star review. Anything less than that, screw you. All right. We'll be back next Monday with more Zero Blitz. I'm off the rails.